So I finally got to get out and see A Working Man. I had to go and see this movie because we have obviously been covering the Snow White controversy extensively on this channel, but what I really wanted to go see was the new film from David Ayer, and this movie actually ended up unseating Snow White in the second weekend at the box office. It is a Jason Statham action flick. This was directed by David Ayer. It was written by Sylvester Stallone, David Ayer, and it's based on a book called Levon's Trade, if I remember correctly, from legendary writer Chuck Dixon. And I believe, if I remember correctly, this was actually originally pitched as a television series from Stallone, but was turned into a film when David Ayer and Jason Statham got on board. And look, I'm ready for Beekeeper 2, which they are going to be working on now. And Jason Statham is, of course, legendary in roles like this. Look, if you are my age, if you are in your mid to late 30s, the Transporter series, another great example. Everybody knows him from films like that. He comes in and out of the Fast and the Furious franchise doing something similar. And I enjoyed this movie, obviously a heck of a lot more than I like Snow White, but that's just because, look, an action movie, a revenge movie, rescue the captive movie is going to be way more up my alley than anything else. And I really, really enjoyed this, though I do think that it has some... There's a lot of callbacks. There's a lot of like the DNA of the John Wick franchise in this. I'm going to get into a little bit of that. I'll talk about the stuff that I liked, the stuff that I think connected it a bit to John Wick, at least in its presentation, and some of the stuff that I didn't like. If I was to give a recommendation off the bat, so that way you could skip this review if you wanted to, I would say go ahead. If you're in it for the Jason Statham action scenes, the stoic, no-nonsense soldier who's going out and causing mayhem and violence, then I would recommend going and checking this movie out at the theater. Although perhaps a bit generic, it is absolutely a good time at the movies. And perhaps if you go on Tuesday when tickets are half off, it's less of a burden. Otherwise, if it's not necessarily your cup of tea, this may be a movie that you want to wait for streaming. But I really, 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 really enjoyed it. I had a really good time. So basically in this movie, you're with Levon Cade. He's an ex-British special forces guy. He is now working for his boss as like a contractor on a construction site, the Garcia family. He's close with the family that owns it. He's close with the Garcias as well as their daughter, who you get to know through an early scene with him where he beats up two guys who are trying to mess with somebody on their construction site. And she realizes this is not just some normal dude. This guy's got skills. You know, it's very Taken. It's very John Wick, and it's fantastic. And you're kind of off to the races from there. What happens is, so as soon as you find this out, she's going out, the daughter, Jenny, is going out to celebrate the end of her first semester at college, and she gets a fake ID from a friend, and what happens is that she is then kidnapped so that she can be sold, she's human trafficked to like this rich pervert. Of course, it is a very, very by the numbers plot, but one that absolutely works because it gets you on the way. And the family, when they realize that their daughter has been abducted, they ask for Cade's help. They ask for Levon's help in getting her back. Initially, he says no because he has to think about his own life, because right now he is trying to save up money so that he can keep his visitation rights to his daughter, who is now living with her grandpa, who blames her for the death of his daughter, his wife, who committed suicide when he was on deployment. And if there was, I was to say, a paradoxically weak but humanizing plot element, it's the story around the daughter, which does a great job when it works to humanize the character of Cade and give you some moments that really, really show who he is beyond just the guy who's trying to save the daughter of this family member who he just, he has love and respect for the family, so he wants to help them. The scenes with his daughter really do work to humanize him, but they do serve as a way of, unfortunately, slowing down the plot at times and making it hard to keep the pace going in the film. Though I think the little girl who played his daughter, she's cute, she's precocious, she's funny, she's great. And I think that she actually does a really good job. And I think what they're doing is they're saving those plot elements because they're hoping to get a sequel out of this. And I think they do a really good job with it, though I do believe that it does slow down the pacing a bit, which works against it in a way because certain aspects of his investigation into this ring are hard to follow. So let's talk first about what I felt this movie had going that was similar to John Wick, the DNA of John Wick, not just in the hyper-capable alpha male, but there's a scene where the character of Gunny, which is one of the guys that he used to work with in the military, says, it's played by David Harbour, and it's done well. He talks about being his weapons sommelier, which we know that from John Wick 2. They have their own, like the Russian mafia, and this has their own cleaning service, much the way the assassins do, to clean up and dispose of bodies like in John Wick. I did not see a unique currency, but they even talk about this group, which I believe they referred to as the Bratva is the Brotherhood, but they called it the War Council, which sounds like the High Table. And they talk about, at the end, they talk about the devil got what he came for, which is, of course, similar to when John Wick talks about Baba Yaga. And, that's all of that stuff kind of tracks. It kind of has what I would call half the style of John Wick, which was like, there's a scene at a bar called Hattie's, and you go into this back room, and the leader of this gang is sitting on like a Game of Thrones style chair, and there's the neon lighting and all of that stuff, which works but doesn't feel like they committed to it in the same way that they committed to the stylistic choices of John Wick. And this one doesn't quite go all in the same way that John Wick did with the gun fu and all of the hand to hand and his ability to headshot from 50 feet away, headshot from 100 feet away, and all of this stuff. It doesn't really commit to it in the same way. One of the things that was great about John Wick is in the first John Wick film, they had such a low budget. Like, it was all of those shots where the camera stayed wide and you saw exactly what was going on. You could see that it was Keanu Reeves doing it because they just didn't seem to have the budget to get in for more coverage. And it ended up perhaps even inadvertently, I don't know what Chad Stahelski was thinking about at the time, but perhaps inadvertently made something iconic in its stylistic choices, because at that time everyone was used to the shaky cam and excessive cutting that you saw in action films at the time. There's this famous clip you can go on YouTube. It's like Brian Mills hopping a fence. It shows it's like 13 cuts in 13 seconds of Liam Neeson trying to get over this fence as they're trying to keep the frenetic pace of this chase up, but you're just cutting away because you can't actually have old Liam Neeson hopping a fence. The great thing is like, no matter what they say, I don't know how old Jason Statham is, but when you think about how long he's been around, he doesn't feel old. He doesn't feel like you're watching old man action movie. You feel like you're watching hyper capable action movie, and it's not necessarily like you're looking at the dude who's been retired for a long time. Even though that is substantive to the plot, Jason Statham doesn't necessarily give off that energy. So, as a lead, Statham is fantastic. What I loved probably more than anything was and my critique to the action was that there was more cutting, there was more editing than I felt like we saw in the early John Wick film. But the bad guys, the secondhand bad guys in this movie, this guy and this girl, absolutely ham it up, and the girl is hilarious, if not a little bit distracting. I feel like they wouldn't have been out of place in the horrible 2024 remake of The Crow, which I absolutely despised. But I think if you had put these two characters in The Crow, it actually would have been really funny. So look, when it's doing the action stuff, it's fun. It's great. There's a couple of moments where it feels like they have to manufacture some emotion with his relationship with his ex-military friend, Gunny, the David Harbour character. The music is swelling. They're doing the same thing with the family. The music is swelling. It's trying to attach emotion that you may just not be able to feel yet because you've only been in this movie for a period of time and you just haven't had time to attach yourself to these characters the way they would have liked. And I saw in Jeremy John's review, I think it was him who said that some of it looked like it was just kind of out of focus, or as if they were going for like a lens flare, you know, like a J.J. Abrams or Michael Bay lens flare. And I honestly, it's probably my own fault for watching the review before I did it, and I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't. But those scenes absolutely do look out of focus in a way, like they were going for this stylistic, artistic shot. It does it when he's in the meetings with these drug kingpins. It does it a little bit when he's in this early meeting with his daughter where they're getting the flare off the window, and it just looks a bit soft. And the only reason you really notice, other than maybe perhaps because I saw it in a review, is that it cuts from this, which is like a medium shot, to a close-up, you know, of their faces, and it's so in focus, and you see every line in Statham's face that it's readily noticeable, and once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. There's also it's kind of the pangs of the digital age, which is like, you watch a lot of videos, allow me to rant about lighting in the age of digital cinematography, where there's a scene where he is waterboarding this bartender / drug dealer to get information. And despite the fact that there are no light sources seemingly in the entire room, it doesn't look like any lights in the room are on, he's perfectly visible in a way that just looks unnatural to the human eye. And it's kind of something that you see a lot in television today. If you've been watching if you watch a show called Paradise, they have these scenes that are color graded, like heavily blue and gray, where it doesn't look like there's light coming from anywhere, but yet everything's visible and there's digital noise everywhere. And you see this also in a scene in the movie when he's at the cabin with Gunny and his wife, and like it's the cabin at night and it's past dusk, and you can see all the way to the woods and everything in the woods, and there's no depth and there's no like shadows, or like everything's in focus. Everything's very, very visible, and it's just a bit distracting. But that's, again, unless you're like a film nerd who likes to look at stuff like that or pays attention or enjoys looking at those types of things, that's not going to bother you. It's just one of those things that changes the way in which you perceive depth and color and light today. And it's just something that I noticed. It is perfectly in line style-wise for a movie like this to have something like that. And the rest of the production value is suitably, you know, high for a Hollywood movie. And I thought it looked great. So the biggest probable, look, you can carry this movie on the action alone. You can carry this movie on 2 to 3 word a sentence. Jason Statham, stoic action guy, asking bad guys things before bad things happen to bad guys. The only issue was that the investigation that he's running to get to Jenny as she's been kidnapped to save her from this pervert rich dude. It's a little bit hard to follow, and it meanders around a little bit. And I feel like they could have tightened it up and probably cut 10 to 15 minutes off this movie. You could have gotten this thing down to an hour and 40, an hour and 50 minutes, and it would have been even more enjoyable. Like perhaps there's people in the theater that aren't necessarily into action movies. My fiance said that, it was a little bit slow at times, but it was fine, but that's not her genre. So I'm going to like it more than she is. If you would cut that runtime down just a little bit, I feel like audiences who aren't necessarily there for the action would have liked it a little bit more. The subplot with the daughter, I understand the purpose. It humanizes him. It draws comparisons back to his own life and the stakes that are involved. But I felt like it slowed down the plot a little bit, but it's kind of saved by just how good of a job this young actress, I feel, did connecting with Jason Statham and, looking to play that role as his daughter. And I thought they did a great job with that, but it slowed down the plot a little bit. The only other thing that I really thought was weird was like the character of Jenny, the girl who has been kidnapped. She never really seems scared or in danger. Like there is no correlating sense of dread or fear for her because she seems to be utterly defiant the whole time. And I get the point of that because at the end, look, she has her own back and forth with this female kidnapper, and she gets her moment there. But to me, if you need to sell the idea that the character of Cade that the character of Levon is going to come out of retirement, risk not being able to be around his daughter anymore because of what this might do to his, like that he's got to get away from violence. He has to be perfect so that he doesn't lose his shared custody. If you want me to buy into the idea that he is going to risk everything he has, what little he has, to help this family that he cares about, I have to also feel that the danger is correspondingly severe, and it just never felt like that. And I don't know if that was just an editor's note or if this was a studio note that they didn't want her to appear that way, but it does do the benefit of, despite the fact that she has a moment where she does save herself. She saves herself from the female kidnapper after Cade gets rid of everybody. It feels like it kind of dampens the stakes that were there for the film, though I think the actress did a really, really good job of doing it without it being over the top. Like, she seems kind of manic and defiant as opposed to it just being some sort of, girl boss, whatever, which would have felt very Hollywood. I felt she did a good job with that. So I feel like if they had pared that back a little bit, they'd allowed her to seem like she was more scared than she actually was, it would have helped the film a little bit. And then at the end, it's very clear that they included the plot with the father of these kids, of these drug dealers, and the father of these members of the mob not going forward with going after Cade because they're looking for a sequel, which could work. But the problem is I feel like the Russian mob guys, for as good as like the two kidnappers were, I felt like the Russian mob guys were not nearly as memorable as, say, Vigo or Yosef in John Wick. Like Michael Nyqvist, rest in peace, and Alfie Allen. When you watch the kid who they kill John Wick's dog and steal his car, you want to see John Wick hunt this dude down and take him out in the most brutal way possible. He is absolutely one of the through lines where it's like you understand why John Wick came out of retirement. Not just because of the dog, not just because of the car, but because this shithead is just such a piece of crap that you want to see him get his comeuppance. And then, of course, Michael, Vigo is just great in that role. And all of the Russians in this just felt like they were kind of like they just dropped actors into it and they didn't get the job done in a way that they needed. There were some other performances that I liked. I felt, unfortunately, like Michael Pena wasn't given enough to do as the father of Jenny. I would have liked to have seen him more than just being in the very beginning and the very end of the movie. But there was like a couple of, like the guy who played Demi, his name's, Maximilian Osinski, Osinski? He did good. He was good enough. But again, it didn't have the vibe that you got in the original John Wick film, and that's not going to abide for some people because it felt like there were so many callbacks to the John Wick franchise, so much inspiration taken from it. So I would be interested to know, guys, I got into some spoilers here, I apologize, what you guys thought of A Working Man. I enjoyed it. I'm probably going to watch it when it comes back to streaming. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about it. I'm guessing there's at least a couple of people here who are going to say they like it just because it happened to trounce Snow White in week 2 of its release, but I would be interested to know. Stay tuned for more stuff coming up soon, guys, on Pop Culture Crisis Live, Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you then. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.